She showed up one sunny afternoon, walking into our lives with a smile that seemed too perfect, too rehearsed. My dad, Richard, welcomed her warmly, and I could see the excitement in his eyes. But something about her felt off from the very beginning. My name is Emma, and this is the story of how a woman pretended to love my dad just to hurt our family, and how we eventually saw through her lies. Vanessa, as she called herself, had this way of talking that made everyone feel like she was on their side, like she understood them. She laughed at all of my dad's jokes, praised his decisions, and acted like she admired our little family. On the surface, she seemed kind and charming, but I could sense something hidden behind those smiles. My younger brother, Jason, didn't notice much at first, happily showing her his latest hobbies and tricks. I, however, watched closely, picking up small details that didn't add up. From the start, she tried to make herself the center of attention. At dinner, she complimented my dad repeatedly, but her words carried a strange edge. When Jason showed her his drawings, she barely glanced at them and made a casual remark that left him confused. She often asked questions about our finances, about what we owned, and even about family routines, all in a way that seemed casual but felt probing. Every time she visited, I noticed how she subtly criticized our home or our habits, leaving little comments that were supposed to seem like jokes but felt more like digs. Despite my unease, my dad seemed completely taken by her. He introduced her as his special friend to neighbors and friends, proudly sharing how wonderful she was. I tried to hide my feelings and stay polite, but deep down, I felt a knot in my stomach. There was something about her that screamed danger, a warning I couldn't ignore. Vanessa had this way of making people feel like she was exactly who they needed, yet she seemed to be learning about us with an agenda I couldn't yet understand. I could see how easily she manipulated moments in her favor, twisting conversations to make herself look better or more caring than she really was. Every visit brought tension I couldn't shake, a quiet unease that seemed to grow like a shadow over our family. Even though she smiled and acted sweet, I knew that she wasn't there for the right reasons. Every laugh, every compliment felt calculated. And so, I decided to keep a close eye, to watch her moves and protect my family from whatever she was planning. It felt like a storm was brewing, but at that moment, I had no idea how intense it would get, or how far she would go to try to humiliate us. It all started with that first smile and a fake warmth that hid something dangerous. From that day on, I knew our lives were about to change forever, and I had to stay alert, ready to uncover the truth before it was too late. It didn't take long for me to notice Vanessa's strange behavior. At first, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that maybe I was just protective of my dad. But the more time I spent around her, the more obvious her intentions became. She had a way of moving through a room that drew attention, especially from people who seemed important to my dad. She laughed a little too loudly at their jokes and leaned in when she didn't really need to. It felt like she was trying to impress them, showing off a side of herself that wasn't natural. At family dinners, she would make little comments about me or Jason that seemed innocent on the surface, but carried a subtle sting. When I shared a story about school or work, she would smile politely but add something like, "Well, maybe that's fine for now, but people really need more ambition, don't they?" Jason noticed it too, though he didn't always understand why it hurt. I felt my suspicion growing stronger. It wasn't just about her being rude. It was about the way she seemed to measure everyone around her, always looking for an advantage. Her obsession with money and status became clear quickly. She would ask questions about our house, our savings, and my dad's work in ways that seemed casual, but I could feel her probing for more information. When my dad mentioned a friend who owned a business, she immediately started talking about investments and opportunities, steering the conversation toward wealth and influence. I could see the sparkle in her eyes, not one of excitement about friendship or family, but one of calculation. Vanessa also started giving advice that seemed to put her above us, as if she knew better than my dad about everything. She suggested we change small things in the house to make it more elegant, or advised Jason to focus on activities that looked impressive instead of what he truly loved. Every suggestion carried a hidden judgment, making us feel like we weren't enough. The more I observed, the more I realized that she wasn't here for our family. She wasn't interested in genuinely connecting with us or supporting my dad. She was here to position herself, to gain influence, and maybe something more. Every interaction made me more cautious, more determined to see through her charm before she could manipulate anyone further. By the end of those early weeks, I knew something was very wrong. Vanessa's behavior wasn't random. It was intentional. I could feel the tension she brought into our home, and I understood that if I didn't act carefully, our family could be in real danger. I promised myself I would watch her closely and uncover her true intentions before it was too late. Vanessa's behavior started to get worse, and it wasn't just behind closed doors anymore. She began finding ways to embarrass us subtly when we had guests over. I remember one afternoon when my dad invited a few colleagues for tea. Vanessa wandered around the living room, looking at the furniture and decorations, and said in a casual tone, "I guess this is cozy, though it could really use some updating, don't you think?" She smiled at my dad as if it were a compliment, but I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. She didn't stop there. When I mentioned my new job opportunity, she tilted her head and said, "Oh, that's interesting, but are you sure it's really the best use of your skills?" Her voice sounded polite, but the meaning was clear. It was as if nothing I did was good enough, and she wanted everyone around to notice it. Jason didn't escape either. When he showed her his model airplane he had been working on for weeks, she laughed softly and said, "That's cute, I guess, but maybe you should try something more impressive." Jason's face fell, and I could see the hurt in his eyes. Vanessa had a way of making her criticisms seem like helpful suggestions or casual observations, but I knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to make us feel small, to show my dad that we weren't as competent or refined as she was. And my dad, completely blinded by her charm, never noticed the hurt in our eyes. Every compliment he gave her, every smile, seemed to strengthen her confidence and make her more daring. Even at family dinners, she found ways to subtly humiliate us. She commented on the way I set the table, the clothes we wore, and even the way Jason spoke. Each remark was carefully placed, time to make the family look less polished or capable in front of others. And yet, my dad laughed along with her, thinking she was just teasing or being playful. It made me furious, but I had to hold back. I couldn't let him see how much she was affecting us. Her subtle humiliation started to affect the family mood. Jason became quieter, less enthusiastic about sharing things he loved, and I felt my own patience wearing thin. I realized that if I wanted to protect my family, I had to find a way to stop her from undermining us without my dad realizing it too soon. Vanessa's charm made her dangerous, and every day she stayed in our home, her control over the situation seemed stronger. It was clear to me now, this wasn't harmless behavior. Vanessa was systematically trying to make us look weak in front of others, and she was enjoying it. The more I watched her, the more determined I became to expose her before she could do any real damage. One evening, I overheard Vanessa talking to a friend of hers on the phone, and what I heard made my blood run cold. She wasn't just trying to impress my dad or make us feel small. She had a plan. She was talking about Richard's money, the house, and how she could position herself to gain control over everything. I couldn't believe it at first. Could someone really pretend to love my dad just for his wealth? But the more I thought about it, the more pieces of her behavior fell into place. Every question about money, every subtle dig at us, it all made sense now. Vanessa didn't stop at planning for herself. She also started manipulating my dad against us. She would bring up small incidents and twist them to make it seem like Jason or I were disrespectful or ungrateful. One day, she told my dad that I was being overly protective and controlling, as if watching out for him was a bad thing. Jason's hobbies and interests were suddenly described as childish or unimportant in her words. She planted tiny seeds of doubt, making my dad question our loyalty and intentions, all while keeping her own agenda hidden behind smiles and sweet talk. I tried talking to my dad, dropping subtle hints, but he would dismiss my concerns. He loved her and couldn't see that she was using him. It was heartbreaking because I could see how much trust and respect I had lost in that moment. Vanessa was driving a wedge between us, and my dad didn't even notice. Every time she complimented him or acted like the perfect partner, he became more convinced she was genuine, while I watched helplessly as the betrayal grew closer to succeeding. The tension in the house became unbearable. Jason started pulling back, sensing the strain but not knowing the full truth. I felt isolated because the person I trusted the most, my dad, was starting to believe someone who was actively working against our family. Vanessa's lies were precise, targeting my dad's fears and hopes, making him doubt us without us even knowing it. I knew I had to act carefully. This wasn't just harmless manipulation anymore. It was a direct threat to our family's security and well-being. Vanessa had crossed the line from subtle humiliation to full betrayal, and I had to find a way to stop her before it was too late. The emotional hurt was deep, not just because of her lies, but because she was targeting the people I loved most. At that moment, I realized this was a turning point. I couldn't just watch anymore. I had to find proof, I had to gather evidence, and I had to expose her. Vanessa's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was dangerous, and I knew the only way to protect my family was to confront it head-on. The storm had officially begun. I knew I couldn't stay quiet any longer. I had to warn my dad about Vanessa, but I had to be careful. I didn't want to push him away or make him defensive, so I chose my words carefully, dropping hints about her behavior without outright accusing her. I reminded him of the small incidents, how she criticized the house, subtly belittled Jason's hobbies, and asked questions about our finances that seemed too probing. I tried to make him see the pattern without sounding like I was attacking her. At first, he didn't believe me. "Emma, you're overthinking things," he said, shaking his head. "Vanessa loves us. You're just imagining problems that aren't there." It hurt, but I understood. He wanted to believe the best in people, and Vanessa was good at appearing perfect. His refusal to see the truth made me feel frustrated and powerless. I wanted to scream, to show him the proof, but I knew I needed to be patient and careful. Vanessa seemed to notice my concern, and that's when things started to escalate. She began increasing her subtle attacks, carefully designed to make me doubt myself and question my own judgment. At dinner, she complimented my dad loudly while adding small remarks about how I could be more supportive or less controlling. When Jason tried to share a story, she smirked and suggested he should focus on something more serious. It was like she knew I was onto her and wanted to intimidate me, reminding me that I had no control. The more she pushed, the more trapped I felt. I wanted to protect my family, but every step I took seemed to be watched and countered. She had a way of twisting situations so that it looked like I was the one being unreasonable. Even when I tried to get my dad to listen, she would step in with a smile, disarming him with charm while undermining me. It was exhausting and infuriating. Despite the tension, I couldn't give up. I kept trying to plant seeds of doubt in my dad's mind, mentioning small inconsistencies in her stories or pointing out patterns in her behavior. I hoped that eventually he would notice the truth. Meanwhile, Vanessa's manipulations became more calculated. She acted like the perfect partner in front of my dad, but her words and actions toward Jason and me were sharp and cutting. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope. One wrong move could push my dad further into her side or make Vanessa suspicious. Every interaction was tense, every word weighed carefully. I knew the confrontation was just beginning, and the emotional battle had only grown stronger. The house felt heavy, like a storm was building, and I could feel that the moment when the truth would come out was getting closer. I realized that hints and subtle warnings wouldn't be enough. If I wanted to protect my family, I needed proof, concrete evidence that Vanessa was lying and manipulating my dad. I started paying closer attention to everything she did. I watched how she spoke to him, noting the small ways she twisted conversations to her favor. I kept track of inconsistencies in her stories, little details that didn't add up, and the way she subtly put down Jason and me when my dad wasn't looking. Every visit became an opportunity to observe her. I listened carefully to the words she used, the questions she asked, and the way she reacted when I or Jason mentioned future plans or finances. She tried to appear loving and devoted in front of my dad, but the truth peeked through in her private conversations and gestures. I made mental notes and started writing down everything. Names, dates, things she said that didn't make sense. Everything went into a notebook I kept hidden. One day, I overheard her speaking to someone on the phone, and my heart sank. She was openly talking about persuading my dad to change his will in her favor. She spoke with confidence, outlining how she could manipulate him and make it seem like it was his idea. Hearing her say it out loud made it real. She wasn't just mean or selfish, she was actively planning to take from my family. The shock made my hands shake, but I knew I had to stay calm. This was the proof I needed. From that moment, I became more careful. I observed every interaction, noting the times she tried to influence my dad's decisions or make us appear unreasonable. I recorded conversations when I could, took photos of things she said or did that contradicted her words, and even kept track of how she acted around friends and visitors to show the pattern of manipulation. The more I gathered, the clearer the picture became. Vanessa was playing a long game, and we were the targets. I also started planning how to use this evidence. I knew timing would be crucial. If I confronted her too early, she could cover her tracks or make my dad doubt me. I needed a moment when I could reveal everything at once, so there would be no chance for her to deny it. Each day, the tension in the house grew. Vanessa continued her charm toward my dad while trying to humiliate Jason and me. Every action I took to gather proof was risky, but I couldn't afford to wait. By the end of that week, I had a clear collection of her lies, manipulations, and the plan she had for the will. I could see how carefully she had mapped out her deception. I felt a mix of fear and determination. The betrayal was deep, but now I had the means to stop her. The next step would be decisive, and I knew it would change everything for our family. Vanessa's behavior became bolder, and her arrogance started showing openly. One evening, my dad hosted a dinner party with a few of his close friends, and Vanessa made sure she was the center of attention. From the moment the guests arrived, she laughed a little too loudly at my dad's jokes and complimented him in ways that made everyone notice her. But it wasn't just about charm. She also started putting me down in front of everyone. When I tried to help with the preparations, she smiled sweetly at my dad and said loudly, "Emma is always so protective of you, Dad. Sometimes I think she worries too much about small things." Her words were meant to sound caring, but everyone understood the tone. It stung, especially because Jason watched quietly, confused by her words. Vanessa's eyes sparkled with satisfaction as she watched me's reaction, clearly enjoying the control she was trying to exert. She didn't stop there. During dinner, she made casual remarks about our home, our family routines, and even Jason's schoolwork, framing everything as if it were concern while making us look small in front of guests. Every comment was calculated, and I could see my dad laughing along, completely unaware of the humiliation behind her smile. It was like she was proving to him that she was smarter, more cultured, and more important than we were. Even as she tried to embarrass me, I stayed calm. Inside, I was furious, but I knew losing my temper would only give her more power. I reminded myself of the evidence I had gathered, proof of her lies, manipulations, and the plan she had to change my dad's will. I could feel the weight of that knowledge giving me strength, even while she tried to control the room and humiliate me. The guests didn't fully understand the tension, but they could feel it in the subtle undercurrent of our interactions. Vanessa's arrogance was growing, and she was showing everyone how confident she was in her ability to manipulate my dad and put us in our place. Every word she spoke, every glance, was carefully designed to dominate the room and make her appear perfect while making me and Jason seem petty. By the end of the evening, I realized one thing clearly. Vanessa was overconfident, and that was her weakness. She had no idea I had proof of her lies, and that knowledge gave me patience and focus. I could see the moment coming when all her schemes would be revealed, and I felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that the arrogance she displayed so openly would soon work against her. The tension in the house was higher than ever, and the audience could sense that the turning point was near. The day of the family gathering, I knew it was time to act. I had collected all the evidence I needed, notes, recordings, and observations of Vanessa's lies and manipulations. I planned carefully so that my dad, Richard, would see everything clearly without doubt. I wanted him to understand the truth without feeling attacked, and I wanted Vanessa to have no way to cover her tracks. As guests arrived, Vanessa greeted everyone with her usual charm, laughing and complimenting my dad, pretending to be the perfect partner. I stayed calm, letting her confidence make her careless. During dinner, I waited for the right moment. When the conversation turned to family matters, I quietly brought out the notes I had collected, keeping my voice steady and calm. I started showing my dad the proof of her manipulations, how she twisted conversations, belittled Jason and me, and asked probing questions about finances. At first, my dad looked confused, unable to process the information. Vanessa noticed what I was doing and tried to interrupt, but I calmly continued, presenting specific examples and showing her own words recorded over time. I revealed the conversation I had overheard about her plan to influence the will and take advantage of our family. The room went quiet, and all eyes turned to her. Vanessa's smile faltered. She tried to act innocent, but her panic was obvious. She stumbled over explanations, her charm fading with every example I presented. Richard's face went from confusion to shock as he realized what had been happening right under his nose. He looked at me and Jason, guilt and disbelief in his eyes, understanding at last that Vanessa had been deceiving all of us. I stayed calm and let the evidence speak for itself. Every lie, every manipulation, and every subtle insult Vanessa had used against us was now clear for everyone to see. The suspense, the tension, and the months of planning by her had all unraveled in that moment. I could feel the relief building inside me, knowing that the betrayal had finally been exposed. Vanessa tried to recover, but it was too late. The guests could see through her act, and the arrogance she had displayed so openly now worked against her. She had no allies, no way to regain control, and the panic in her eyes told the truth more clearly than any words could. My dad, shaken but finally aware, realized how close we had come to losing everything to her. By the end of the evening, the truth was undeniable. Vanessa's plan was fully exposed, and the betrayal she had engineered for months had come to light. The tension and fear she had caused were replaced with relief and a quiet satisfaction. Finally, our family could breathe, knowing that the storm she had brought into our lives was over, and justice had been served. After Vanessa's true intentions were revealed, the atmosphere in the house shifted completely. The arrogance she had shown for months disappeared, replaced by embarrassment and panic. She couldn't meet anyone's eyes, and every word she tried to speak sounded hollow. The guests, who had witnessed her charm and manipulation for months, now saw her for what she really was. Her carefully built image had crumbled, and the public humiliation was complete. Richard, still in shock, turned to me and Jason. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the weight of realizing that he had been deceived by someone he trusted. He apologized quietly, telling me he should have listened sooner. He admitted that he had been blinded by her charm and that he had almost allowed her to hurt the family. His words were heavy with remorse, but I could feel a new sense of respect forming between us. He now understood how carefully I had watched, how patiently I had collected proof, and how determined I was to protect our family. For the first time in months, our family felt united. Jason, who had grown quiet and withdrawn under Vanessa's subtle attacks, seemed to relax. We could all breathe a little easier knowing that the threat was gone. My careful planning and observation had reversed the betrayal, and the sense of victory was not just about exposing Vanessa, but about protecting the people I loved most. Vanessa left the gathering that night, her pride shattered. She had no way to regain the trust she had destroyed, and her manipulative plans had failed completely. Watching her leave, I felt a quiet satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge through anger or confrontation. It was about using patience, intelligence, and courage to stand up for my family. Her humiliation was the natural consequence of her own actions, and it was a lesson that deceit and selfishness eventually catch up with those who practice them. The aftermath was a time of healing. Richard spent more time listening to me and Jason, involving us in decisions and showing a deeper appreciation for our perspectives. I earned his trust, not just because I had exposed Vanessa, but because I had remained calm and thoughtful while protecting the family. It was a powerful lesson for all of us about vigilance, resilience, and the importance of standing up for what is right. In the end, Vanessa's betrayal backfired completely. She had underestimated our family, and her overconfidence had led to her exposure. The experience brought us closer together, strengthened our bonds, and proved that clever planning, careful observation, and unwavering loyalty can overcome even the most deceptive threats. The emotional revenge had been achieved, not with anger, but with patience, courage, and love for our family. After Vanessa left, the house felt lighter, like a heavy cloud had finally passed. The tension that had been building for months slowly began to fade. My dad, Richard, seemed more present and attentive, and Jason and I could feel the warmth of our family returning. It wasn't just relief, it was a deep sense of connection and trust that had grown stronger after everything we had gone through. We started spending more time together, talking openly about things we hadn't shared in a while. Richard began involving us in family decisions again, listening to our thoughts and respecting our opinions. Jason, who had been quiet and withdrawn under Vanessa's manipulations, smiled more, laughed more, and seemed like his old self again. I felt proud of how our family had endured the betrayal and come out stronger. The experience had taught us all valuable lessons about trust, vigilance, and resilience. We realized that love alone isn't enough to protect a family. It takes awareness, careful observation, and the courage to stand up when something feels wrong. We had faced a serious threat, and by working together, we had protected our home and each other. That knowledge brought a quiet satisfaction that went deeper than any moment of anger or revenge could have. Vanessa never returned. Her plans had failed, and the exposure of her deceit ensured that she could not harm us again. We didn't need to dwell on her absence. It was enough to know that she had lost the power she thought she had. The humiliation and consequences she faced were the natural results of her actions, and seeing her leave our lives without influence felt like the final piece of closure. As the days passed, our family continued to heal. We celebrated small victories and supported each other's interests without fear of judgment or manipulation. Richard's trust in us grew, and our bond became unshakable. Jason and I realized that even in the face of betrayal, family loyalty and love could overcome deceit. We had learned to protect each other, to trust our instincts, and to act when necessary. Looking back, the experience made us stronger, closer, and more aware of what truly matters. The fear, the tension, and the manipulation were all behind us, leaving only the lessons and the strength we had gained. We had survived a storm that could have torn us apart, and instead, it had brought us together. In the end, our story became one of resilience and triumph. The manipulator was gone, our family was intact, and we had proven that loyalty, courage, and careful action could overcome even the most cunning betrayal. The house was filled with laughter again, trust had been restored, and we moved forward with a deep sense of pride in our unity and the knowledge that no one could break the bond we shared.